Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little more toothy, and not in a good way. We're diving into the gruesome, nerve-rattling world of medieval dentistry. A time when teeth were pulled with iron pliers, everyone had halitosis, and anesthesia was just a strong prayer and a mug of ale. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. If you've ever dreaded a trip to the dentist, count your blessings, because back in medieval Europe, your dentist was probably also your local blacksmith, and your checkup came with a side of screaming. Your story as a medieval dentist doesn't start with inspiration, it starts with stench. You're born in a one-room hovel with a dirt floor, a thatched roof, and a family who believes bad breath is simply part of being alive. No one brushes their teeth, no one has a toothbrush, and soap. That's for fancy nobles and monks with skin conditions. As a baby, you gnaw on hard bread crusts and dried roots because that's what's available. Teething isn't helped with chilled rings, it's soothed with beer-soaked rags and whispered prayers. Everyone assumes crying means you're growing stronger. In reality, your gums are inflamed, and your first baby tooth will likely rot before it gets the chance to fall out naturally. By age 5, you've already seen a grown man spit out a hair during dinner and keep chewing. Your grandmother stores her pulled teeth in a pouch for luck, and your father's smile resembles a crumbling graveyard. No one's concerned. This is normal. And then there's the breath. Oh, the breath. Every adult smells like a cave full of old cheese and regrets. Your friends don't notice because they smell the same. You, however, have a sensitive nose. Unlucky for you, but it was the first sign that you might be destined for dentistry. At age 7, you watch the local blacksmith pull a villager's tooth with tongs meant for horseshoes. The man screams, bleeds, and thanks him afterward. You ask questions. Too many. So they hand you the rag, tell you to mop the blood, and suddenly you're the assistant. There's no ceremony, no oath, and no official title. But that day, your path is sealed. You're the child who isn't afraid of mouths, the boy who doesn't faint at blood, the one who knows how to boil pliers and bite back nausea. Congratulations. You're now the unofficial apprentice to the village's least glamorous profession. Your toys are forceps. Your lessons involve pain. And your playmates are mullahs dropped into bowls with a dull clink. You don't dream of being a knight or a bard or even a scribe. You dream of not flinching next time someone screams in your face. And so begins your journey. Not with a white coat, but with a blood-stained apron and a very unfortunate destiny. Let's get one thing straight. Dental hygiene in the Middle Ages was a myth, and if it ever existed, it died screaming sometime around the 6th century. You, the future village tooth yanker, grow up in a world where people clean their teeth with, well, nothing. If they're fancy, and we're talking monastery-level fancy, they might chew on twigs or rinse with wine. But most people, they just let nature take its course. And nature is not kind to mullahs. There's no toothpaste, no floss, and no idea that sugar might be bad for enamel. Mostly because enamel isn't a word anyone's heard of. The only thing sweet peasants consume regularly is misery. Though nobles do enjoy the occasional honey-laced disaster that accelerates mouth rot with regal flair, Growing up with an eye for teeth, you begin to notice a pattern. Everyone's breath smells like something died in their mouth and brought friends. Halitosis isn't a condition, it's a fact of life. You learn to speak from a distance. You instinctively breathe through your mouth, which ironically only makes your own smell worse. Children lose teeth young, not from age, but from accidents, infections, or chewing on rocks hidden in bread. By age 10, most people already have 2 or 3 ghost teeth, holes where something used to live. People accept this like they accept mud on their shoes or fleas in their bedding. There are herbal remedies, of course. You might chew mint or rinse with vinegar if you can afford it. But mostly tooth care consists of hoping the pain goes away before it spreads to your jaw and kills you. And no one talks about the gums. Gums are just red, swollen meat that bleeds when touched. And that's fine. Apparently, the idea of brushing them gently with a soft bristled brush would have sounded like witchcraft. As a budding medieval dentist, you begin cataloguing this horror with fascination. You poke teeth with sticks. You learn the difference between wiggly but alive and dead but hanging on. And when someone asks what you want to be when you grow up, you say someone who makes the screaming stop. Because in your world, there are only 2 kinds of smiles, the toothless and the soon-to-be. So how does one become a medieval dentist? Simple, you don't. There's no medical university, no dental license, and no board exams. You learn by watching people suffer. And the best way to do that is by working under the most hands-on man in town, the barber-surgeon. He's not a doctor. He's a multi-tool with blood on his sleeves. He trims beards, lances boils, sets broken bones, and amputates gangrenous limbs between breakfast and lunch. Naturally, he also pulls teeth because why not? And now you're his apprentice. You sweep the floor. You hold down screaming patients. You fetch boiling water, not to clean tools, just to look impressive. Your first week you witness a leg amputation with a dull saw and a leather strap as anesthesia. You faint twice, but by week 2 you're holding a torch. By week 3 you're helping steady heads while your mentor yanks moolah with blacksmith tongs. You ask too many questions, which means you're promoted to clean-up duty. Blood, pus, teeth. Your mentor is a practical man. If it's loose, pull it, he says. If it's black, pull it. If they scream, pull it faster. He teaches you that a quick extraction is better than a clean one. That infection is God's decision, not yours, and you'll get paid more if you pretend to pray first. There's no textbook, just instinct, superstition, and repetition. You learn to recognize which tooth will come out with a twist, and which one will snap in half, and leave you with a sobbing peasant and a pair of broken pliers. When things go wrong, you learn the backup plan. Blame demons, blame diet, or in emergencies, blame the stars. Astrology is surprisingly popular in medical theory, especially when the abscess can't be drained and your patient starts foaming at the mouth. Sometimes you help with battlefield injuries. Sometimes you assist with leeches. But your mentor always makes sure you're there for tooth days. Because, as he puts it, nothing humbles a man like bleeding from the face. And slowly, you learn through blood, through screams, through trial and terror. You're not a healer, not yet, but you're becoming something far more essential in the medieval world, a man who can make the pain go away for a price. If you're expecting a tray of gleaming instruments lined with surgical precision, you're thinking way too modern. A medieval dentist's toolkit looks like something confiscated from a dungeon, and you're learning to use every single piece. First, the pliers. Thick, rusted, heavy, not made for dentistry, but for horseshoes, meat hooks, and stubborn nails. The handle smells of old sweat and iron. The grip is questionable, but if it clamps down on something and pulls, it's considered effective. Then comes the tooth key, a twisted little crank designed to twist a tooth sideways until it pops loose. It rarely works the first time. Usually it breaks the tooth in half, which is followed by you frantically digging out the root while your patient sobs into a burlap sleeve. You have hooks and scrapers too. One looks like a shepherd's crook, perfect for snagging stubborn fragments. Another resembles a sharpened spoon used to scoop out abscesses and pack them with mouldy bread or ashes. Sterile? Absolutely not. There's also the mallet. Yes, a mallet for when the pliers fail and you need a bit of persuasion. You hold the tool against the tooth and give it a good tap. If your aim is true, the tooth pops. If not, well, the jaw might shift a little. The instruments aren't labelled. Some were once used for animal care. Others might have been fishing tools in a past life. You inherit most of them from the barber-surgeon's late mentor. Tools he inherited from his mentor, and so on. One has a notch carved into the handle. It's either a maker's mark or someone's tally of fatalities. Cleaning is optional. Sometimes they're wiped with a cloth. Occasionally passed through a flame, not to sterilize but to add drama. Bloodstains are considered seasoning. Your job is to keep the tools organized, cleanish, and ready at a moment's notice. When someone walks in clutching their jaw, the last thing they want is delay. They want you to pull something quickly and without asking too many questions. These aren't instruments of healing. They're weapons of mercy. And in your hands they'll decide whether a man walks out smiling or never walks out again. In the medieval world, dental science didn't exist. But theories? Oh, they had plenty. Tooth pain wasn't caused by bacteria or decay. No one knew what plaque was, and enamel might as well have been a type of prayer. So, what did people believe caused those throbbing, pus-filled, jaw-splitting toothaches? Worms. Tiny, evil, invisible worms. Yes, toothworms. These mythical little beasts were said to burrow into your marrow and chew away day and night like termites in a timber beam. If your tooth ached, it meant the worm was hungry. If it cracked in half, the worm had finished its meal. As a budding dentist, you're taught to look serious while nodding wisely when someone asks, "Is it the worm again, master?" And you say yes, because it always is. Of course, there's also the religious angle. Some say tooth pain is punishment from God for lying, for vanity, or for eating too much honeyed bread. Your job is to remove the sinful tooth as if you're exorcising a demon with pliers. Patients often ask you to pray before an extraction. You oblige, mostly to calm them down, and maybe a little because you're afraid too. After all, you've seen infections travel to the neck and kill a man in days. Surely the gods are involved, right? But the most popular belief, and the one your mentor swears by, is that if you place a roasted onion next to the aching tooth, the worm will crawl out. Of course, all you ever see is steam and tears. No worms, but the patient believes it. Placebo magic and onion breath. A medieval double cure. You even learn a few worm-charming rituals. One involves whispering to the tooth, threatening the worm. Another includes heating a mixture of wax, herbs, and goat fat, then dripping it near the gums to smoke the worm out. Spoiler, it never works. Eventually, you come to accept the truth. Not about worms, but about belief. People want a reason for their pain, even if it's absurd. It's easier to picture a hungry worm than confront the reality of rot, disease, and death. And so you carry on. Healer, priest, pest control. Just another day in the world of medieval mouth monsters. You've watched your mentor yank dozens of teeth from wailing villagers. You've held down the heads, passed the tools, and cleaned up the mess afterward. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for the first time. You're handed the pliers. The patient is a middle-aged farmer named Edric. His tooth has been aching for a week. His wife says he hasn't slept, eaten, or prayed. Today he's desperate enough to let teenager yank it out. You try not to tremble as your mentor steps back and nods. "Go on," he says, arms crossed, apron stained. Time to earn your fingers. Edric sits on a stool, knuckles white, eyes wild. You mutter something that might be a prayer. He responds with something that might be his last words. You find the tooth, a molar, black and cracked with swollen gums that look ready to explode. You position the forceps, hands slick with sweat. Edric tenses. On 3, you whisper. 1, and on 2, you twist. This is what you were taught. Don't wait for 3. It's mercy. Sort of. The tooth doesn't move. Edric screams like he's being skinned alive because, well, he sort of is. You adjust your grip and push down harder. You hear a sickening crack, and for a moment you think you've done it until half the tooth comes out, and the rest stays buried like a jagged little dagger. Your mentor sighs. Keep going. The next few minutes are a blur of blood, curses, twisting metal, and panic. You finally wrench out the last fragment, nearly falling backward with the force. Edric slumps forward, face pale, mouth flooding with red. You've done it. Your hands are shaking. Your apron looks like you've murdered a pig. And yet Edric is alive. Sobby, sure, but grateful in that dazed, pain-shocked way that only a medieval peasant can be. You clean the wound with wine, pack it with herbs, and wrap his head. He thanks you with a bloody smile. You try not to cry or vomit, maybe both. Later, your mentor slaps your back. "Not bad," he says. "You only crack the jaw a little." You sleep that night with the tooth in your pocket. Your first trophy, your first scar. Once you've pulled a few teeth, you start to notice something that never goes away. Not in the workroom, not on your clothes, not even when you dream. It's the smell. At first, it creeps up on you, a faint sourness in the air. You assume it's the stew boiling next door, or maybe your mentor's feet, but then you realize it's coming from mouths. Rotting teeth have their own stench. A gag-inducing cocktail of pus, blood, fermented food, and the unmistakable tang of necrotic flesh. Every time a patient opens wide, it hits you like a wall, and it stays with you. It soaks into your apron, your hair, and your fingernails. You start to notice other things too. The smell of fear. It's real, sharp, and metallic, especially when your patient is sweating through their tunic, eyes darting, knuckles white on the arms of the chair. Fear makes people stink in a very particular way. It mixes with the tooth rot, the garlic breath, the damp wool, and the faint aroma of hopelessness. No candle or herb bundle can cut through it. You stop trying. You also start keeping track of how many people pass out before the pliers even touch their mouth. You learn to catch heads before they fall. You get good at predicting who will scream, who will faint, and who will try to run. You have a rope for that now. Standard practice. Sometimes the rot is so advanced the tooth crumbles under your tool like mouldy bread. What comes out isn't a tooth. It's a memory of one, blackened and soft. A fragment of a past meal and a future infection. You try not to breathe too deeply, but it's no use. The smell is part of you now. You leave the workshop and people instinctively take a step back. Children cry when you pass. You've become an old factory omen. One day, a merchant you helped weeks ago walks past you in the market. He nods politely, then holds a cloth over his nose. You're used to it because in this life, you don't just carry tools and bandages. You carry the scent of every open mouth you've ever reached into, and there are many more to come. By now, you've stopped seeing mouths as parts of people. You see them as battlefields, and you're sent in after the war. Every patient who sits in your chair carries a story between their lips, and it's always written in rot blood and broken enamel. Their mouths are disasters, caves of blackened stumps, cracked molars, exposed nerves, and gums that look like overripe fruit. Some teeth lean sideways, clinging to their neighbours like drunken soldiers. Others stand jagged and alone, yellow with age and soft to the touch, and beneath them the gums are swollen, red or grey with decay. You've even seen maggots, and not just once. You don't ask questions anymore. You just pry it open and assess the damage. There are teeth that wiggle when the patient breathes. Others explode into fragments the moment your tool touches them. You've seen mouths where not a single tooth remains intact, just roots poking through pus-filled craters. And then there are the infections. Sweet heavens. Boils beneath the tongue, cysts behind the ears, entire jaws that pulse with every heartbeat. You once drained a pocket of pus the size of a walnut. The man thanked you through tears. That was a good day. You work fast, not for efficiency, but because the longer you look, the worse it gets. These aren't dental visits. They're triage sessions. You don't fix. You remove, scrape, and pray. You keep a bucket for discarded teeth. It fills by midday. The smell hits before the weight does. You begin to recognize people by their mouths alone. Ah, yes. The blacksmith with the abscess under his tongue. The baker whose gums bleed when he blinks. The widow with the 7 remaining roots all pointing in different directions. It's become your normal. You try to stay detached, but every so often someone leans back, opens wide, and what you see sends a chill down your spine. Not because it's worse than usual, but because you recognize it in yourself. That back throbbing at night. It looks familiar. You're not just the healer of ruined mouths anymore. You're a ticking jaw in your own chair. By now you've stopped flinching at screams. In fact, you barely notice them. They're the soundtrack of your profession, echoing off stone walls and wooden beams like some choir of pain and regret. Each shriek is unique, some high-pitched and panicked, others low and guttural like a wounded animal. You used to offer comfort, a warm cloth, a whispered prayer, and a lie about how this won't hurt much. That stopped after your 5th extraction, the one where the man bit through your glove and wept through the entire thing. Now there's no sugar-coating it. You don't have sugar anyway, just pliers, leather straps, and the kind of emotional distance that only a medieval dentist can develop. You don't have anesthesia. You don't even have numbing herbs most days. What you have is a bottle of wine to dull the edge, and if they're lucky, someone to hold them down, preferably a spouse or a strong neighbour who doesn't mind blood on their sleeves. The process is simple. You wedge open the mouth, you locate the offending tooth, you twist, pull, or bash, depending on how stubborn it is. The patient howls, flails, and cries out to saints long dead, and you keep going because if you stop, it only gets worse. Some scream before you even touch them. Others go stiff and silent, the kind of quiet that means they're too scared to breathe. You've had people faint. You've had people vomit. You've had people soil themselves mid-procedure, and you kept working through all of it. Sometimes they scream your name, not in gratitude, but in curses. You've been called a demon, a butcher, and a devil in boots. One man swore you were sent by hell to punish gluttons with iron pincers. You took it as a compliment, and afterward most patients don't thank you. They stumble away, clutching their face, dripping blood, and muttering oaths. A few nod, fewer pay. The ones who survive with their jaw intact are the closest thing you'll get to a 5-star review. But no one forgets you, because in a world without comfort, you're the one who trades pain for slightly less pain. And people will always scream for that. It was bound to happen eventually. You've handled dozens, maybe hundreds of screaming, flailing patients. You've dodged knees, elbows, and even one accidental headbutt from a panicked nun. But nothing prepares you for the bite. It starts like any other procedure. A local miller, sweating and snarling through a swollen cheek, comes in holding his jaw like it's going to fall off. "Just get it out," he growls. Classic tough guy. You position him, say your usual half prayer, and start inspecting the molar. A real mess. Black, cracked, barely holding on. You don't even need the pliers yet. You just poke around with your finger to check movement. That's when it happens. He clamps down hard. Your finger is caught between two rotting teeth, and suddenly you understand what real pain feels like. You scream. He screams. Someone else in the waiting room screams out of sympathy. You try to pull away, but it's too late. His jaw locks with desperation. He's not attacking you, he's panicking. But your skin doesn't care about intentions. It's breaking. Blood fills your glove. Your mentor rushes in and tries to pry his mouth open with the blunt end of the tooth key. It works eventually. You stagger back, holding your hand like it's made of fire. One of your fingertips is torn, the nail half gone. Your hand swells immediately. There's no antiseptic, of course, just wine, boiled water, and the hope that God's not in a vengeful mood today. You wrap it tight and keep going. There are still 5 more extractions on the schedule, and you need the coins. By nightfall, your hand is red and throbbing. Infection sets in fast because, surprise, human mouths are full of horrors. You develop a fever. For 2 days you hallucinate conversations with the Virgin Mary about molars. Eventually you recover mostly. Your finger never bends quite right again. A reminder. The miller, he sends you bread once a year, guilt-ridden and toothless. From then on, you work differently, faster and more cautiously, and you start using a metal probe instead of your finger to test a loose tooth. Because in your line of work, the most dangerous bite isn't the dogs. You'd think the nobles, with their silk robes and feathered hats, would have better teeth. They don't. In fact, the wealthier they are, the worse their mouths tend to be. Why? Because they can afford luxuries the poor never taste. Sugar, candied fruits, imported wines, and pastries so sweet they practically melt the enamel off your teeth on contact. You're summoned to manor houses and castles where the floors are polished, but the smiles are horrifying. Behind powdered faces and perfumed robes lurk mouths in full rebellion. Abscesses the size of walnuts, gums like bruised fruit, and teeth so blackened you wonder if they've been cursed. And yet the nobles expect grace, elegance, and discretion. They sit on velvet cushions while you kneel beside them, peering into the jaws of what looks like a battlefield soaked in honey and rot. They want you to work quietly, quickly, and if possible, without telling them exactly what you're removing. One noble woman insists her tooth is only resting improperly. You remove it in 3 bleeding pieces. They don't scream like peasants. No, they groan theatrically. They faint with a flourish. They complain that the herbal rinse is too bitter or the linen too scratchy. One lord demanded you stop the extraction so he could compose himself with a poem. And then there's the cosmetic dentistry, because if a noble loses a front tooth, it must be covered or replaced. You've packed gaps with wax and painted teeth with white lead, which, yes, is toxic, and once carved a fake canine from ivory that promptly fell out during a banquet. They pay well, at least. Coins, chickens, rings, even a cloak once, though it smelled like wet dog. But they also expect favours, secrets kept, and egos stroked. You don't mind, because every time a baron or duchess opens their mouth expecting perfection, and you peer inside to see the same festering trench as any beggar in the street, it reminds you of something important. Decay is democratic. It doesn't care how rich you are. And you're the great equalizer, pliers in hand, ready to remind everyone that beneath the silk and titles, they all rot the same. By this point, your reputation precedes you, but not in the way you hoped. You walk into a tavern and conversations die. Children duck behind their mothers. A man once spat at your feet and crossed himself, muttering something about plague demons. Another carved a charm to wear around his neck to ward off your curse. You're not a hero. You're not even a healer. You're the tooth man, and that means something dark to the villagers. You're a necessary evil like famine or taxes. They come to you only when the pain outweighs their terror. No one visits a medieval dentist casually. They wait until they're desperate, delirious and half hollowed out by infection. Then they appear at your door, trembling, hat in hand. You try to be gentle at first, but gentleness doesn't matter. The moment they see the pliers, the fear takes over. Some flinch when you speak. Others don't meet your gaze. The bravest ones offer a nervous smile with whatever teeth they still have. No one celebrates your work. When you do it well, they scream. When you do it poorly, they scream more. If you save a life, it's forgotten. If you botch a pull, it's legend. One woman claims you removed a wrong tooth. You didn't. But the story spreads anyway until you're the man who steals molars for fun. A group of boys once followed you through town singing a little song. One for the farmer, two for the priest. Hide your teeth, or he'll make a feast. You laugh because you have to, but it stings. You never wanted to be feared. You wanted to help. Still, fear has its uses. People pay faster. They listen. No one questions your price when they think you might yank the wrong tooth just to prove a point. And when someone collapses in the street from an abscessed jaw, you're the first person they call. Not because they trust you, but because you're all they've got. So you roll up your sleeves, open your kit, and step into the ring once more. You're not loved, you're not liked, but you're remembered. When the plague comes, dentistry takes a back seat to pure survival. The Black Death doesn't care about cavities. It floods the streets with fevered bodies and leaves you wondering whether that abscessed jaw is just an abscess or the beginning of the end. Still, people come to you. They always do. Not because you're a miracle worker, but because you've handled pus before. You've seen swelling, drained rot, and packed wounds with herbs. You've watched people scream themselves hoarse from jaw infections. So what's one more plague boil between friends? Your work shifts from extractions to emergency lancing, swollen necks, black gums, and lymph nodes the size of chicken eggs. You heat your blade, grip the skin, and slice. Pus bursts like a blistered fruit. You don't gag anymore. You haven't in years. Sometimes they live, sometimes they don't. You start keeping track in chalk marks on your oar, not out of vanity, but to keep your mind from unravelling. Payment is odd now. No one has coins, so they pay in bread, dried meat, or promises they won't live long enough to fulfill. A dying merchant gives you a ring. A widow gives you her late husband's boots. You sell what you can and bury what you must. The smells worsen. Your workshop becomes a hybrid clinic and crypt. You stack firewood for warmth, but it doesn't help. The chill is deeper now in the bones, in the silence that comes when 3 patients in a row never sit up again. Still, you're busy. The plague is bad for the body but good for business. And people whisper about you. The one who drained the poison from my neighbour's neck. The one who pulled 3 infected teeth, and the man survived. The one who might know something the priest don't. You don't correct them because in a time when everyone is dying, being slightly less deadly makes you powerful, so you keep cutting, draining, and packing wounds with mould and prayer. You don't sleep much, you don't speak unless needed, but you're alive and working. In the age of plague, you're no longer just the man with pliers, you're the one they call when it's almost too late. It begins with a dull ache, nothing serious, a throb in your back molar after a long day, easily ignored, but you know better. You've seen this story 100 times in 100 mouths. It always starts as nothing, then it becomes everything. At first you pretend it's fatigue, you gargle wine, you chew on clothes, you rub your jaw when no one's looking. But inside you know the rot has come for you. You try to work through it. After all, there are mouths worse than yours. Peasants with no teeth at all, nobles whose breath wilts flowers. You've survived the screams of others. Surely you can survive on your own, but the pain grows. It crawls up your jaw, into your ear and behind your eye. You stop eating. You stop speaking. You start dreaming about the tooth. The same one over and over, falling out, growing worms, whispering to you in Latin. You consider asking your apprentice for help, but he's too green. He hesitates. He still wipes his tools on his sleeve. So, one night, in the dim light of your own workshop, you do what you've done for years. You pull your own tooth. You wedge a wooden block between your molars, steady your hands, and reach in with the pliers. You've done this hundreds of times. You know exactly how to grip, twist, and remove, but you've never done it yourself. The pain is indescribable, not because it's worse, but because it's yours. You groan, half in rage, half in agony. You sweat through your tunic. You taste blood, then more blood, and then finally relief. Sort of. You drop the tooth into your tin bowl. It rattles next to the others. For a moment you stare at it. It's just another ruined thing in a room full of them. You clean the wound. You don't pack it. Not out of oversight, but pride. You'll heal or you won't. It's always been that way. The pain lessens, but something lingers because for the first time, you understand what every scream really meant. And now you carry it. Not just in your hands, but in your empty jaw. There's no grand ending for a medieval dentist. No cathedral burial, no gilded plaque, no choir singing praises of tumours yanked and abscesses drained. Just an old man in a blood-stained apron stooped over his bench, tools worn down to crooked metal nubs. Your hands ache now, and your knees grind like worn teeth. Your vision blurs in the evenings, and your ears ring with echoes of 1,000 past screams. The patients still come, but you move slower. You speak less. You grip the pliers with fingers that no longer close without pain. One day, you reach for bread and feel it. A crack, a soft crumble in your mouth, another tooth gone, your own again. You don't bother saving it. You've lost count. You no longer eat apples. You drink your meals now, chewing only when necessary. Your tongue searches the gaps in your mouth like a soldier walking a ruined battlefield. There are fewer survivors each year. You wonder sometimes if the villagers will remember you when you're gone. The man who wore death on his breath and mercy in his hands. The one who pulled more teeth than most people had in their heads. But truthfully, they won't build you a tomb. You're not a priest. You're not a knight. You're just the man who helped them scream a little less. Your grave will be shallow, your name scratched onto a wooden plank. Maybe, maybe not. But the work you did, it lives on. In every mouth that still chews without agony. In every child who didn't die from a jaw infection. In every noble who hid their rot behind a painted smile and never once said thank you. And in the bucket of teeth beneath your workbench, a quiet monument to a life of blood, rust, and nerve. When you die, there will be no mourning procession, just a silence in the workshop and a smell that lingers for a day too long. Eventually someone else will pick up the pliers, someone younger, hungrier and less haunted. The screams will return, but for now your hands go still. Your breath fades, and somewhere in the village a child will feel a sharp pain in their tooth. They'll ask, "Where's the man who makes it stop?" But you'll be gone. No tombstone, just gums. Before silk, before linen, before anything remotely resembling a fashion statement, there was just skin. Human skin exposed to sun, wind, cold, insects, and every other force nature could throw at us. In the earliest chapters of human history, clothing wasn't about style, it was about survival. The very first humans lived in harsh, unforgiving environments, and they had to get creative fast if they wanted to make it through the night. The solution? Whatever was lying around, animal hides from the hunt, flexible tree bark, woven reeds, and even grass twisted into primitive belts and skirts. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. And it was here, in this primal moment, that clothing was born. These weren't outfits, they were shields. The fur of a predator might keep you warm in winter, but it also made you smell like a meal to the next lion that came sniffing. Still, for early humans, warmth outweighed aesthetics. We wrapped ourselves in raw skins, tied them together with sinew or vines, and hoped for the best. But over time, even these crude covers started to take on symbolic meaning. The man wearing the biggest bear hide, probably the one who killed it, and the woman with the intricately woven grass skirt. Maybe she was the elder, the storyteller, the healer. Clothing began to signal more than just protection. It whispered status. The earliest archaeological evidence of clothing tools, bone needles, dates back nearly 40,000 years, suggesting we were already tailoring animal hides into more fitted garments. That's not just functional, that's thoughtful, that's human. And once we started migrating to different climates, icy tundras, sweltering deserts, and humid jungles, our clothing evolved accordingly. In cold regions, layered furs and tight wrappings insulated our bodies. In hot climates, we shifted toward breathable, loosely draped fabrics. This wasn't just invention, it was adaptation. So, while it's tempting to imagine early humans running wild and free, the reality is far more practical. From the moment we began covering ourselves, clothing became our first form of technology. A quiet revolution in fibre and fur sewn together with necessity and just a hint of early pride. And this was only the beginning. When we think of ancient Egypt, we picture pyramids, golden masks and jackal-headed gods. But look closer, and you'll notice something else. Everyone's dressed impeccably in linen. Not silk, not wool, linen. And not just any linen. Smooth, bleached and immaculately pleated. Egypt's hot, dry climate made linen the ideal fabric. It was light and breathable and could be worn in layers without trapping too much heat. Made from the flax plant, linen took serious effort to produce. First, the flax was harvested, soaked and beaten into submission, then spun into fine threads, and finally woven into fabric. This wasn't casual wear. Linen was labour-intensive and therefore valuable. Pharaohs wore it, priests wore it, and even the dead wore it, mummified in layer after layer of carefully prepared linen wrappings. Egyptians believed clothing mattered not just in life, but in death. Your outfit helped secure your identity in the afterlife. A well-wrapped mummy wasn't just fashionable. It was spiritually fortified. Social status was literally woven into what you wore. The elite flaunted semi-transparent linen tunics, often pleated or dyed white, a colour associated with purity and divine power. Ordinary workers wore simpler kilts, sometimes little more than a wrapped cloth tied with a belt, but they too appreciated linen's cool elegance. Children often wore nothing until puberty, but even their first cloth marked a rite of passage. Jewellery, of course, completed the ensemble. Wide collars of faience and gold, lapis lazuli amulets, and beaded sandals. A nobleman's wardrobe might include wigs, kohl-lined eyes, and perfumed cones melting over the head at fancy banquets. Fashion in Egypt wasn't frivolous. It was ritual, identity, and rank. Priests, who had to remain ritually clean, only wore the finest white linen and nothing of animal origin. No wool, no leather. Clothing was not just fabric, it was spiritual armour, separating sacred from profane. Even slaves and servants had clothing suited to their tasks, though rarely with adornment. Yet whether they worked the fields or tended the palace, linen defined Egyptian fashion for thousands of years. So, while other civilizations were still bundling up in skins and wool, Egypt was pioneering one of humanity's first fabric revolutions, smooth, sunlit, and stitched into eternity. If Egypt spun gold from flax, Mesopotamia wove its civilization in wool. In the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates, the earliest city-states were also among the earliest trendsetters. Their fashion draped robes, wide belts, and layers of wool. The pride of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria. Wool was more than clothing here. It was economy. Sheep were everywhere, and their fleece was essential to Mesopotamian trade, temple offerings, and taxation. In fact, temple complexes managed flocks and textile production like miniature empires. Clothing was centralized, sacred, and bureaucratic all at once. The typical outfit for men was the counterkeys and a wraparound skirt or tunic, often made from tufted wool, giving it a shaggy pelt-like appearance. At first glance, it looked like someone skinned a sheep and wore it untrimmed. That's not far from the truth. But over time, it became a stylized ceremonial garment, even a royal one. Kings, priests, and deities were often depicted in Kanuki's robes, indicating its prestige. Women's garments were similarly draped, but sometimes extended to the ankles with one shoulder exposed, practical yet refined. These outfits weren't sewn or tailored like Egyptian linen. Instead, they were wrapped and pinned, shaped more by artistry than stitchwork. Social class dictated the details. Elites wore fine dyed wool, rich indigos, and deep reds, sometimes decorated with fringe or embroidery. Servants and labourers wore coarser versions, and like in Egypt, children often went nude until a certain age. Modesty, after all, was a fluid concept in early civilizations. Mesopotamians also wore wide belts or girdles, often made of leather or wool cords, to hold their garments in place. These belts were status items, sometimes decorated with bronze studs or inscribed with names, prayers, or symbols of divine protection. Headwear was common, especially among men. Conical hats, headbands, and turbans marked identity and status. Soldiers and messengers might wear simple leather caps, while priests and royalty had more elaborate coverings. Jewellery completed the look. Earrings, bracelets, and necklaces made of gold, silver, lapis, and carnelian. Even the poorest often wore at least a simple bead or amulet for protection. So, while Egypt flowed with linen, Mesopotamia strutted in wool, raw, warm, and weighty with meaning. Their draped style wasn't just about fabric, it was about power, piety, and the world's first wardrobes.